In the first reading today from Joshua, the Jewish people finally, after 400 years and 40 years of wandering in the desert, have arrived at the banks of the Jordan. They're back to the promised land. That illustrates in a way how humanity struggles through the desert to come back to God Himself, and how the second reading talks about the reconciliation of humanity and God. And in the gospel we have the parable of the prodigal son, perhaps the most famous of all the parables, because it tells us about the restoration of humanity with God the Father. And Rembrandt painted a masterpiece of the prodigal son's return. Catherine the Great brought this Rembrandt painting of the prodigal son back to St. Petersburg. It's there today. 20 years ago, the famous spiritual writer Henri Nouwen visited the museum there in St. Petersburg, and he spent hours contemplating and gazing at the portrait of Rembrandt and the prodigal son. Perhaps one of the reasons why Nouwen was so fascinated by this, the love of the Father for the Son, was that he had a difficulty in getting along with his own father. He was very sensitive towards this great love he saw in the portrait. Oh, he had wished in his own lifetime of his father that they would have had something like was illustrated in the painting, but he did not have it. But after gazing hours upon the painting, he wrote a book called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And he asked the great question about all the characters in it. Which one of the various people in this portrait do we identify with most? And there's 6 individuals in the portrait. There's 3 unknown figures way on the edge in the darkness, looking at the prodigal son and his father and the elder son. Some might say that the 3 represented those who quite didn't understand the great love between God and humanity, and being disengaged, they looked on it from a distance. Others would say one of the figures was the mother of the prodigal son, and of course the mother of the older brother. And she was weeping. She was weeping tears of sadness because the older brother wasn't very welcoming of his younger brother. She's weeping tears of joy because the younger son was home. And as we move from the painting more towards the middle of it, where it becomes brighter, we see the elder son there. His face betrays the bitterness and the resentment he has. Somehow that's mixed with, he would like to have had the celebration that the prodigal son is having. The prodigal son, he realized, went away, squandered everything he had, came back with nothing. But he never left home. He never broke his father's heart. But why didn't he get a celebration in his life like that? And he's looking down at the two, envious in a way. And then as we move towards the center of the painting, it's brilliant light. And the light is really shining on the hands of the Father as he is holding his Son who's come back. He's holding his Son in great reconciliation, great love. Now, one of the hands, or the hands themselves, really portray what it's all about. One hand is a strong, muscular hand that's around the shoulders of his Son. And the other hand is more of a soft, delicate hand on his shoulder. And now one is saying that one hand represents the fatherhood of God, and the other hand represents the motherhood of God. That God is both father and mother to this prodigal son, and the great love there. We see that, in a way, the red garment that the Father is wearing, the huge red garment trimmed in gold, is almost like a tent covering both the prodigal son and his father. It's like the meeting tent of Moses. It's like the meeting tent where the Ark of the Covenant dwelled. That here humanity and divinity are in the Ark of the Covenant. It's right there. Also, the words of the gospel come back. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem," Christ would say, "I wanted to gather you together as a hen gathers her chickens together to keep them safe." Those are the words of Christ. But they're also the words of the father of the prodigal son. He wants both sons together and the family together in peace, in reconciliation. The wounds that the prodigal son inflicted upon himself, upon others, now they've gone through and enter healing. How powerful this is. And the question of doing, which one of the characters in this portrait do you identify with most? And after great thought, now one kind of realizes that each one of us identifies with each one of the characters. That in a way we're like those on the outskirts to the painting, looking on, not getting involved in this great love between the Father and the Son. And then at times we're like the elder brother. We're resentful. We're bitter. Why didn't God do more for me now or in my lifetime? And then we go on to see the prodigal son himself. We identify with that. But can we really identify with the father of the prodigal son, God himself, who forgives? People do not earn forgiveness. They do not deserve forgiveness. They do not merit forgiveness. Forgiveness is a free gift from God that the Father bestows upon all humankind. And we also are called to give this free gift to others, not because they've earned it or deserve it or have merited it. It's because of the generosity of God. And we are called upon to be mother and father in a way to all humankind, and bestowing upon them this type of reconciliation. Back to the elder brother. The father says to the elder brother, when he wanted to know why didn't he have a celebration, and the father says, you've been with me all this time. We've been together. What more, in a way, is there than that? The elder son failed to really rejoice and celebrate that he is with his father every day. And so we are like the elder son that way. We may complain, we may be bitter about the negative things in life, but how about the positive things that we can do ourselves? The intimacy and the closeness that we can have with God. He's right there. He's right there in our tent, living with us. So let us celebrate the fact that this all-loving God that's illustrated in Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son, that we are called upon to make our own portrait. And in that portrait, we are with the Father and the Mother.